one of the nice things about working in this conference is being able to sit down or Zoom with somebody you don't know and say, would you please be a speaker at our conference? One of the first people we called was Paul Ries. And he said yes, and we're better off with him because of that. So I thank you very much, and would you welcome once again Dr. Paul Ries.
Thank you, Tom. Somebody lost their water. All right, as Tom said, this is the home stretch, and so I'm doing you a favor in giving you a handout so you don't have to take notes. I teach a class or provide a session on how to talk trees, and one of the things I tell people not to do is to what's known as colloquially as death by PowerPoint. I'm going to violate that rule today, and that's why I'm giving you a handout, because I'm going to talk about data, Dana, and that is, I'm going to try to interpret some research studies for you. And so what I've done is I've given you a handout that has a list of all the studies that I'm going to talk about, and there's a lot of them. So on the front page of that two-page handout is an outline of what I'm going to talk about for the next bit, and on the back page is the list of all of the studies, so you don't have to try to copy things down from my slides. So I don't usually start off my presentations by apologizing, but there's a lot of words on these. So my topic is reframing trees, leveraging the lesser understood benefits of trees. So the team that asked me to speak, they got to choose the first talk, which I gave, and I kind of got to choose the second talk, because I think this is really, really important. So by this hour of the day, you've heard a lot of concepts, and you've heard a lot of ideas, and you've listened to a lot of speakers give you some really good information. And what I want to do today in this last talk is kind of help put it all together for you and get you thinking about how we communicate trees. Because I know that there's not a single person in this room that can't, including me, that can't do a better job of communicating tree information to people. Whether that is to clients, or to constituents, or to our bosses, or to our employees, or to volunteers, or whoever, we need to do a better job of talking about the benefits of trees. Again, I told you I'd show you a couple pictures I took the other day when I went down to White Sands National Park. This is photography is a hobby of mine, so if you haven't been down to White Sands, this is what it looks like. It's a really, really unique landscape, and again, thanks to the folks with the conference here for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to visit your fine state and to catch some, to fly down there and catch some good images. So, all right. Here's the learning objectives, and I told you I'm a college professor, so I let you off the hook this morning and didn't force you to listen to my learning objectives, but I'm going to do that this afternoon. I really want to kind of explore this idea that we need to reframe how we help people understand trees, discuss how we do that in a strategic way, and explain what that might look like. So those of you who have seen my presentations before perhaps know that I rarely put a PowerPoint presentation together with at least one of my 10 grandchildren. So this is my grandson Micah here. He's now 10, but this picture was from when he was about 3. And he wanted to go walk to the mailbox with me. It was a nice fall day, and we were walking down the sidewalk, and the street trees were doing their great fall color. And Micah decided that he was going to try to catch the leaves falling. And you see it with one at his shoulder here and one in his hand that he's caught while we're walking down the street. And I just sort of pulled my cell phone out and I took a picture of that. Now, a normal picture of a grandchild, and most of the thousands of pictures I have of my grandchildren are all straight on, looking at them, okay? And when we frame a picture, or when we have in our mind taking a picture of a tree or a job site or whatever it happens to be, we usually do that. We usually put the subject right in the center, straight head on. But if we can think strategically and think creatively about how we might reframe that picture, we might get a picture like this. This picture would have been fine if I had showed you a picture of Micah's face and the smile he had with the tree. But seeing this from above, taking it from my vantage point, taking it down on him, I reframed that photograph to sort of tell the story. This story or this photograph is not really about Micah. It's more about the wonderment of a child, exploring nature to me. And the fact that I was able to catch a leaf falling in midair at his shoulder there and another one in his hand, to me really makes that actually one of my favorite pictures, even though you can hardly tell it's Micah for me. But I'll remember him that as a little 3-year-old boy wandering down the street. So that's kind of what reframing is all about to me, is thinking differently about how we tell stories, how we convey tree information. So Randy, are you still in the room here? Yeah, there you are. So Randy showed you the fire triangle, so I'm going to show you the communications triangle. And I gave a talk on this the last time I came to Think Trees. Good communication, in my opinion, takes 3 things. You have to navigate this triangle: a key message, a target audience, and a proper tool. So I'm not going to recap that talk much, except to say that we need to think about the key messages that we use and whether they're the right ones and whether we're being strategic enough in communicating those to people. But you have to have a key message. Think trees, that's a key message, right? Think Trees, New Mexico, that's a key message. You have to have a key message, and you have to have a proper audience, and you have to use a tool that is going to help people understand the concept that you're trying to convey. So as I reflect on how we talk about trees, and that's, as I said, a whole nother talk I give, I think that it's important for us to understand how high the stakes really are. And following Dana and Dana, they just told you, they just gave you some great observations about how we get community leaders engaged with the importance of what it is we do with trees and how they should think about trees. Now, I'll go out on a limb here, pun intended, and say that I believe that all of you in this room have a certain level of tree knowledge that exceeds about anybody you come in contact with. Most people don't know what they don't know when it comes to trees. And I believe that we, as arborists and urban foresters, have a duty to help people understand information about trees. Now, you all heard of Trees Are Good. Caitlin, are you in the room somewhere? Caitlin works for ISA. ISA's motto is Trees Are Good. And we know that trees are good. We know what things that trees provide. So I'm going to talk today about the fact that trees aren't good. That really trees are great because they give us a whole lot more benefits than what you see on the screen here. So I would argue that generally people tend to know that trees are good. They know that trees give us clean air. I mean, we all learn that in 5th grade, right? Photosynthesis, carbon dioxide, all that kind of stuff. People know that trees give us shade. People know that they like to recreate in areas that have trees. People generally know this. But I would argue that in general, people don't have a clue about the list that's on the right side of the screen. They don't know that trees have influence on things like human health and lower crime and increased economic values. So, with apologies to ISA, and as you heard, I'm a past president of ISA, we've spent too much time telling people trees are good. We've not spent enough time trying to convince them that trees are really great. So I want to challenge you to reframe this conversation a bit. And let's move away, at least for today, let's move away from trees are good for a little while and think about how trees are great. Now let's unpack this word reframing. As you saw from my presentation this morning, you know I like to use definitions. If you look this up in a dictionary, reframe is a way of changing the way you look at something and thus changing the experience of it. So I would advocate that we need to think about how we reframe the benefits of trees and how we advocate for them and how we communicate and engage people for trees. Here's Exhibit 1. There's a tree in my neighborhood. The sign, if you can't see that from the back, says, "Slow down, we love our children." Now to me, the message of this is, we love our children enough for you to ask you to slow down while you're driving through our neighborhood, 25-mile speed limit, please. But we don't love them enough to care properly for that tree and to put a swing 1.5 inches from the edge of a cut stub of a top tree. So they love their children, but only there's a limit on that, right? That's what this tells me. We've failed to help people understand the importance of proper tree care because they continue to do things like this. They're jeopardizing their own, in this case, grandchildren. I actually happen to know, I've seen little kids here before. They are jeopardizing their own grandchildren's health by damaging their own tree. Makes no sense. If we're going to reframe, I think you want to start with the why. I talked about this in my previous visit to you all back about 2012 or 13. I'm not going to talk about it today, except to mention Simon Sinek's 2009 presentation, the third most watched TED Talk ever. He says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. He talks about the golden circle, why, how, what. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Tom gave me a compliment the other day, or this morning rather. I was talking to him this morning and he said, when we interviewed you on Skype, your enthusiasm for trees really came through. Well, thank you. I'm enthusiastic about communicating the importance of trees to people. And that's part of why I'm here today. So if we're going to understand the need for communicating benefits of trees to people, we have to understand people's connections to them. And there are a lot of connections that people have to trees. I won't get into all these different connections except to tell you one story, because there's power in a story. And if you're going to communicate trees to people, you need to think about the stories that you can tell. And here's the thing, they don't have to be your stories. They can be other people's stories. If they're your stories, all the more powerful. But I think as urban foresters and arborists, we need to consider our abilities to tell tree stories. So that handsome young guy on the right is actually me, about 30 some odd years ago. Probably doesn't look like me anymore. Had a lot more hair, a lot less weight. I was a certified arborist way back then. And one day I was in the office and I got a call. This was pre-internet days, okay? I got a call and there was an elderly voice on the line. A woman, I could tell her voice she was probably in her 80s, I would guess. And I said, "Hello, Urban Forestry, can I help you?" And she said, "Yes, you have to come out here today and grind the stump of the street tree in front of my house." I go, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Well, what's your address?" And I took it down. And she lived in a neighborhood, and at that time we had one stump grinder. And what we did is we collected all the addresses of where stumps needed to be ground, and then in efficient city bureaucracy, we went and we ground the stumps in that neighborhood. So I patiently explained this to this woman, that I'd put her on the list and we'd get to it. She goes, no, it has to be done today. So at this point I'm thinking, oh, this is an interesting situation. I don't usually get a sense of urgency with tree stumps, with hazard trees perhaps, but tree stumps. And so I said, "Ma'am, what is so urgent about that you want this tree stump ground?" And she said, there's a bus stop in front of my house, and the kids jump up on the bus stop and they make faces at me. They jump up on the stump and make faces at me. I said, okay. I'm not sure that that's a problem of the stump. That might be a problem for the school or the kids' parents, but I dutifully said that I would try to do something about it. You don't know what people's connections are to trees. We can surmise those. We can guess, but we don't always know. So let me advocate to you that there are 3 reframed stories of trees that we need to tell. 3 taglines, 3 mottos, 3 key messages that you need to tell, that we all need to tell. These are on your handout. And I'm going to go through them, but I'm going to go through them with research that proves the point. So let's start off with trees provide benefits that we can't live without. Now, this is a fact. It's an established matter of science. This is not my opinion. We cannot live without trees. But our community decision makers don't really know this. They don't realize it. Or if they do, they just take trees for granted. So how do we get them to act accordingly? As Dana says, we use data. And we've got that. You know, when I've started my career out as an urban forester, we knew trees are good. We knew trees provided us benefits. We had no clue about the data because there was very little research going on back in the 80s. There wasn't that much tree research available. We didn't have people like Greg McPherson and Kathy Wolf and others pumping out data that told us how great trees really were. This particular study by my friend Jeff Donovan with the U.S. Forest Service in Portland, he researched and found that women with more tree canopy within 50 meters of their home were less likely to have underweight babies. Are you following this? Trees influence birth weight outcomes. That is a public health issue. Now, as Jeff would say, this study suffers from the nice trees, nice neighborhood problem. The more there's more trees, the nicer the trees are, probably the nicer the neighborhood, i.e. the wealthier the neighborhood, i.e. the less unemployment there is, i.e. the more healthy people there are. But he wasn't trying to prove causality. He's not saying that trees, the presence of trees, cause better birth outcomes. He was establishing a linkage of influence. So what he was saying in this study is that urban trees reduce the risk of poor outcomes, that it has an influence on it. Study number 2. This was a study in Philadelphia by a number of folks who measured the stress, the heart rate of people walking out in an urban area. And they found that with views of green space and trees, they had a physiological response of less stress. Now, how do you control that? You don't. The tree is impacting you. The tree is influencing you, whether you know it or not. So this reduction in heart rate suggests that there's a biological link between the urban forest and a reduction in stress. Again, back in the 80s, we knew this, but we had no data. It was just an anecdote to us. And finally, back to the emerald ash borer that Dana and Dana talked about. Tree loss from EAB was associated with increased human mortality. Data from 6 years worth of studies in 15 states showed 15,000 more deaths from cardiovascular disease and 6,000 more from lower respiratory disease. All caused by the lack of, or all related to, not caused, all related to the lack of, or the reduction in tree canopy cover. So, trees influence human health. And there are so many ways, and I just did a quick search of all the different studies that tie trees and human health. And these are all the outcomes. These are all the different ways that trees influence health. So the question is, why aren't we telling this story? Well, it's probably a lot of reasons. One, it's complicated, right? Two, it's not intuitive. We know we like to sit underneath a shade tree, but we don't necessarily understand that that might translate to a lower stress rate, right? So it's up to us as arborists and urban foresters to help tell that story. So the summary of trees and human health. Research shows that more trees mean better birth outcomes and reduce stress. And that, in a nutshell, if you're looking for the bottom line, means that if we let them, trees help us live longer and healthier lives. So, those 3 studies, hopefully, have shown you that trees are really a matter of life and death. Number 2, the second story I think we need to tell is trees make and save us money. And the reason for this is we all work for somebody, or we had to answer to, or we're influenced by somebody for whom money is a huge determining factor. Whether that's our bosses, our company owners, whether that's our mayors, or our city councilors, or our bosses, whoever, we have to help them understand that trees are really the best financial investment around. And that the trees allow us to avoid spending money for things like stormwater and for things like heating and cooling because of the services that they provide. Three more studies. Again, these are on the back page of your handout. Can I go back real quick? Somebody wants to take a picture. All right. This study, I figure we'd go a little farther afield here. 10 megacities in 5 continents found that trees provide each city with over $500 million worth of ecosystem benefits. So it's not just New Mexico, it's not just Albuquerque, it's not just the western United States, this is worldwide. Next study. Trees provide benefits not just to cities, but to individuals. This is from my home state of Tennessee, where a researcher did a study that showed the relationship between trees and property values. The fact that higher property values lead to increased municipal tax revenues and allow people to sell their houses for more. So this economic basis doesn't just apply in big pictures to cities, in hypothetical results. It is cash in your pocket when you choose to sell your home. And then finally, we lose money if we don't have trees. This particular study looked at land cover for 97 cities encompassing 59 million people and analyzed how tree cover reduced their summer air conditioning and the need for air conditioning and electrical use. Again, even though this is an economic one, it has a human health benefit as well. It helped avoid about 250 to 350 deaths annually. So the idea behind these economic studies is we can relate trees and cold, hard cash. This is not a hypothetical. The challenge for us as arborists and urban foresters is really to convince people of that and to help get that message across. So the summary of the economic benefits of these 3 studies is really that because economic perspectives carry a lot of weight with elected officials, we need to be able to help people understand that the urban forest is infrastructure. And that unlike most city infrastructure that depreciates, like the streets and the sidewalks and the sewer systems, it appreciates as time goes by. One of the challenges of working in municipal urban forestry programs is we often hear people say, well, we could do this or that. We could buy a police car or we could plant trees. That is a non-argument, really, because it needs to be and, not either or. We know that the presence of trees reduces crime just as much as an additional police car might. All right, the third story then is that trees can make or break our communities. This is the social side of urban and community forestry. And it has to do with the fact that trees correlate to positive social outcomes and the lack of trees to negative ones. The first one is trees and crime. This is a study from Cincinnati, Ohio, an area I used to work, and again, there's the EAB again popping up. EAB infestation was significantly and positively associated with increases in crime in a number of different categories in this study. So the areas where the EAB had hit and the trees died, property values went down, crime rates went up. Study number 2 in the community area, social area, lack of trees is an environmental issue. This particular study, conducted by my friend Vivek Shandis at Portland State University, looked at the historically racist practice of redlining. I'm sure that went on in this city as it did in most from about 1930s to 1970s. where areas were deemed bad investments for things like mortgages and business loans. Vivek and his team put together a 108-city study across the U.S. that showed the relationship between the present-day patterns of heat island effects and this racist practice of redlining. Next study, trees are central to the quality of community life. I thought I'd go international again for you just to show that this is not related to the U.S. A study in Malaysia related the diversity of green infrastructure to the relationship of well-being and suggests that green infrastructure affords residents participation in physical, leisure, and social activities. That's the output, right? But the outcome really is things that trigger relaxation, comfort, and satisfaction. And again, this is not necessarily about the trees. It's about what the trees do for us. So we might work with trees, but it's our job to help people understand what trees do for them. So to conclude this particular aspect, or this particular story of community health, trees provide a sense of place and belonging. We know that the benefits of urban trees have not fallen equitably on all of our communities. And I think that the impact that trees make on people make for very compelling stories, again, that I would argue that we and you need to know how to tell. Now, here's the disclaimer. Trees are not just good, they're great, but they are not perfect. Study by a number of folks looked at the disservices of urban trees. And we know that while urban trees provide many, many benefits to us, they also have some disservices. As arborists and urban foresters, I think we often fall into the trap, or we make an uncritical assumption that, well, everybody loves trees. Well, no, they don't. And a tree that is not cared for may not be an asset. It may actually be a liability in a community. That is why what you do on a day in and day out basis is so critically important, because of trees are not just good, because trees are great. Ultimately, I would propose that the argument for urban trees is really one about health, either economic health, human health, or community health. And that if we can help tell these kind of stories, we're going to get more support for what we do. We're going to get more clients. We're going to get more votes. We're going to get more funding. We're going to be able to advocate for and advance our urban forests. So here's the summary slide that just basically these 9 studies plus the 10th being the trees have disservices that kind of summarize things. Trees are a matter of life and death. They make and save us money, and they can make or break our communities. So that is the data. That's the data. That's the background. That's the justification. That is the research science between everything I just talked about for the last 24 minutes. Everything, you want to look at those stories up, or those studies up, you want to read them, they're on the back page of the handout. So, what do? Well, I think we reframe the trees based on all of these different aspects. If everybody see this little internet meme, imagine if trees gave off Wi-Fi signals, we'd be planting them. So many trees, we'd probably save the planet. Trees don't give off Wi-Fi signals. They just produce the oxygen that we breathe. 3 strategies that I would argue that we need to think about. Reposition trees as essential, advocate for tree equity, and foster community engagement. Let's look at each of those. When the pandemic hit, I was supposed to give a talk at a conference. I don't remember where it was right now. But the conference went virtual instead of in person, so they continued to have me speak. And they said, "Can you address the pandemic?" And I said, "I sure can." So I said, well, let's think a little bit about this. I think in terms of what we do as arborists and urban foresters, the pandemic caused us to sort of reframe our conversations a little bit about resiliency and what is essential. I was fascinated by how the term essential entered almost everyone's lexicon during the early days of the pandemic back in April, May, and June of 2020. Some local governments, some state governments decided that they would be the arbiter of what was essential and what wasn't. Anybody remember this? They said some jobs are essential, some jobs aren't. Here's my take on that. If your job is paying a mortgage, if your job is supporting a family, all jobs are essential. Sorry. I don't think I want a government bureaucrat deciding which jobs are essential and which aren't. That's probably another talk. But let's turn this word essential a little bit on its head. We know that trees are essential for our health, they're essential for reliability, and they're an essential city service for safety. So what it comes down to is about managing trees for resiliency. Now, one of the really, what I found fascinating and weird parts of the pandemic was the fact of all these government officials deciding what we could buy, where we could go, and so forth. And, the governor of Michigan banned the purchase of garden seeds. This only lasted about a week. She got so much backlash. But stores like Home Depot and Lowe's were actually cordoning off their garden section because she said that garden seeds were non-essential. Go figure. But anybody know what one thing that not a single municipal government, not a single state government banned or suspended during the pandemic? Anybody know? Lottery tickets. Lottery tickets. So here's the challenge for you. How in the heck do we make trees more valuable than lottery tickets? I don't have an answer for that. I claim as a college professor, I always say, I don't have all the answers, but I ask really good questions. But that's one I'm still waiting to get an answer for. So we position trees as essential. Number two, I think we need to advocate for tree equity. As I said, redlining is in the early 1900s left parts of our country with cities that were hotter and still without less tree cover today. The nonprofit group American Forests in Washington, D.C. came out with this tree equity scorecard a couple years ago, which I think is a really fascinating tool to help the non-tree focused people in our lives understand the importance of this. So I took the liberty of studying Albuquerque for you. I could have done other areas, but I thought Albuquerque would be appropriate given where we're at today. So this is the tree equity map for ABQ, and you can look this up, by the way. You can catch the screenshot just as I have. And let's kind of let's unpack this for a second and look at two neighborhoods. Somebody from Albuquerque probably knows the name of these neighborhoods. I don't. But here's a neighborhood here with a tree equity score of 100. Now, remember I told you that there's a relationship. There's an influence of trees to economic and environmental health and public health and a whole bunch of other demographics. So let's look at the indicators of this little neighborhood, Los Ranchos de Albuquerque. People of color, 33%. People in poverty, 6%. Unemployment, 8%. Now let's contrast that nice green color with one of the orange ones. Here's a city, here's another, and these are by census districts, by the way. So here's another census district, and it only has a tree equity score of 50. Look at the other statistics for that. Unemployment, 26%. People in poverty, 67%. Do you understand the correlation here? The contingency, the influence, the impact that trees have? You can do this for all of them. By the way, there is I was being charitable and I picked 15. There actually is a neighborhood or a census tract here in Albuquerque that has a score of 18. But I thought that the juxtaposition between 18 and 100 was just a little too far. So I did 18. I did 50 to 100 just to help you understand. If you don't live in Albuquerque, if you live, I met somebody from Las Vegas this morning. If you could do this for your city, you can do this for all the cities. American Forest has done a phenomenal job of unpacking all of this census data, all this health data, all this demographic data, and all this canopy cover data, and helping us think about tree equity using this particular tool. So take a look at the tree equity scorecard and give some thought to what that looks like for you. So trees are essential, tree equity is important, and finally, fostering community engagement, I think, is vital. So community engagement is really this process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geography or interest to address the quality of life issues that we face in our cities. So we think, how do we engage? Who do we engage with? And why? So funny story about this particular picture. This was an Arbor Day planting I was working with in the city of Portland. And we invited the governor to come plant a tree, and he was unavailable. So he sent one of his representatives, and I won't identify which one of the people in the picture is his representative. But the representative got out of the car and looked around and said, "So where is this urban forest?" I thought, oh my, where do I begin? We have our work cut out for us. But we have such great opportunity. And that opportunity really depends on our success, our ability to engage with a lot of other people. If we're going to reframe how we communicate the benefits of trees, I think we need to really think deeply about what that looks like. I showed this slide the last time I came to visit you a number of years ago when I talked about the importance of connecting and engaging people with trees. We can't just stop with communicating, because all communication does is it makes people aware. If we can connect people with the benefits of trees, they can get some understanding and hopefully some appreciation. But if we can engage them, if we can get their buy-in, if we can help educate them, they gain a deeper understanding, and hopefully that leads to behavior change. And that is where, ladies and gentlemen, we as arborists and urban foresters, I believe, have our greatest impact. Telling people trees are good is fine, but it doesn't get us all the way here. It doesn't get us to behavior change. That takes a level of engagement, takes an investment of our time and our ability to tell people about what we do and why we do it. All right, audience participation time again. What I'd like you to do is to group up with folks where you're at and think a little bit about how we can engage our communities better. Think about the data that I've just given you. Which one of these three stories do you think would work in your area, would work with your city council or whoever? So I want you to pair up, group up, and analyze an issue. Tom, do we still have more ducks? Did we get ducks bought? Okay, Tom has bought off enough ducks back that we will give that. We have 2 microphones here. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Nope, I'm going to give you 9 minutes. You have 9 minutes to strategize, and then we'll ask for a couple people to share. So, go. All right, 2 minutes. This is your 2-minute warning. This is 2 minutes. You like that? You ready? All right. We have our first volunteer, and it's a ringer. Brian. That's okay. All right, if you'll come back to me, please. If you'd like to enter the queue to win a duck, which translates to a raffle ticket, line up at one of the mics, and we'll run through this, and then I've got a few more slides. So, Brian, go ahead. Mike, can you get the mic? Did you see what I did there?
Look at that.
Did you see what I did there, Mike?
So, Paul, I got the regionally sensitive ethnic duck.
Okay.
The New Mexico duck in here.
Is it red or green?
It's yellow with a brown hat, a sombrero. The story I wanted to tell was in talking about trees and tree value and getting money to plant, one of the things that had come up at UNM was that we're always challenged budget-wise. And I made the comment at one point in talking to our UNM campus police chief, I said, you know, we need more trees because of the benefits and the effect on urban crime and education and health and all of the rest of the things in here. I said, so we need to spend less money on your police cruisers and more money on planting trees. And it wasn't until Paula, she pointed out to me that they have the $120,000 police cruiser because that's a recruitment tool. And without that, we might not have police on campus. So I reframed that and I said, okay, give me an $80,000 police cruiser parked in the lot in there, and I'm betting that most rookie police or young police aren't going to tell the difference. Give that $40,000 difference, let's spend $20,000 on planting trees and $20,000 on maintaining trees.
That is awesome. And you know what you also could come back with is go look at the UMN website. It doesn't have pictures of life on campus with police cars in it. It has with trees in it. Trust me. Go my own university is the same way. You go to Oregon State, if you want to go to Oregon State and you look at oregonstate.edu, you know what the first thing that comes up is? Beautiful picture of the MU quad with huge trees on it.
And
Are people, you're using trees as a selling point, we should be too.
the other aside that I would pass on, and I'm not sure that it's not easy to find, but it was published in 2007. It was a study of national trees regionalized, and Albuquerque was the Interior West Tree Benefit Guide model for the cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah, that was Greg
of urban
McPherson's work,
trees.
yep.
And there is
Yep.
a PDF that's available. Greg has often said they'd get it republished, and
Yeah.
I don't believe that. But there's also a trifold that you can download and print out, and I'll try to make sure that it's on our Think Trees website. And last year with Kathleen Wolf, the listing of her compendium of, and these are publications that you can download of hundreds of topics in there, and
Yep.
more from work that you've done in there, so that you can have a publication in your hand to give to a client, so that you're not trying to necessarily
Yeah.
articulate all of
And
it.
that's the thing. Thank you, Brian. And that's the thing. You have the information. You have more research at your disposal right now than I have had than I had when I was young in my career. It's out there. The information's there. You need to be able to access and use it. Okay, there's nobody standing at the mics. You were all talking this morning. All right, I'm a college professor. That gives me a license to call on people. You know who I'm looking at, don't you? Athena's going like this. Go ahead.
Something we talked about, an issue in our community in Taos is we don't really have a lot of new public trees. A lot of them are old, aged cottonwoods, probably going into retrenchment or dying soon. And so something we could look into doing is contacting a local urban forester and seeing if we could find funding to bring in new trees.
Yeah.
Because many of our public trees are older and
Yep.
and will pass away at some point.
Good. Find somebody else to do it too. Don't just rely on the forester to plant trees. Get Public Works to plant trees. Get the library to plant trees. Get everybody to plant trees, because you don't have to be the only person that does that, right? You want to find other people to plant trees for you. Thank you. Did you get your duck? Over here.
Hello. Yeah, we're a for-profit tree company, and we serve pretty high-end clients, people with money. And what can we do? Or do you have any tangible examples of how we could leverage that? Or there's whole
Sure.
You showed that map. There's whole areas we never have done a single job in
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And probably won't.
Sure. So, you ever heard of a Roundup program? If you've got a job and it's $950, ask your client if they want to round it up to $1,000 and use the $50 to donate to a tree nonprofit to plant in lower canopy areas. Great idea. Athena.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Athena.
I saw you call on me, so I came up.
Old habits die hard. Athena is one of my graduate students, so.
So one thing we came up with was, we have a lot of great arborists in Santa Fe. I'm from Santa Fe Seeds of Wisdom. And there are some of us who are creating information, like we presented this to the tree board, which is the iTree Ecosystem Services from iTree Echo. But how can we get this information and share this data and make it more accessible so that the community knows about it and kids get excited, they can start using the data for their own research?
Yeah.
So those are some questions we came up with.
Here's an answer.
All right.
Find a messenger, okay? One of the best ways to get information out is not for you to be the one that always gives it out. Find somebody that you can teach, that you can educate, that is willing to share the stories for you. And it doesn't have to be on your behalf. It could be, but I mean, you're going to benefit from having those stories out there as well. So find messengers. Make sure that young lady gets a duck. All right, two more. Well, these last two will be done. Go ahead.
Kind of similar question to one that was asked already, but a fair number of clients that I interact with, they're not the direct homeowners. Homeowner, I don't know the actual percentage, but there's a high number of them that they aren't here.
Yeah.
They're not in even New Mexico per se. How do you reach those people?
So
because it's been mentioned, trees on the private land are important as well. How do we reach that?
Yeah, they are. So the rental market is a tough one in the urban forestry field. There's a story in Portland that the city of Portland did some research about why people weren't getting trees, even though they were available free to them. And they interviewed someone who said, hey, I'm a renter. I don't want to plant trees because it'll increase the property value, and then my landlord's going to increase my rent. Okay, talk about a catch-22 situation there. So, I think you have to kind of cultivate an environmental ethic or a tree literacy in people, and you've got to get them to want to do it because it's the right thing to do or because it's going to improve their own life. But you have to understand the trade-offs that they see. But, if you can convince that person that trees are good, then they're not a renter and they buy a house, and then they're the homeowner, then they're going to be more likely to plant a tree because you've invested that time up front.
Hi, thanks. A couple of us in our group are involved with the Arid LID Coalition, which is low impact development, which is based around green stormwater infrastructure and a big part of that is using that water for trees. So we had a few initiatives that we've been involved with, and we talked about it. We did a residential scale rainwater harvesting workshop. It happened during COVID, so we ended up, as part of that, making a whole bunch of videos, which are available through Bernalillo County website and our Arid LID website. But a part of that was gathering rainwater for planting trees and other plants. And the other element that we're trying to work on right now is to start to create a template for medians, so we can do GSI rainwater harvesting
Excellent.
on medians,
Yeah.
taking the water off of the streets and stuff. And part of what we're really trying to do is engage the neighborhoods, get involved with the neighborhood associations, and do some little bit of workshops or information session to tell them what GSI is, why it's important, how it can be used, and trying to engage the people not only in supporting it, but even getting involved in the process.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. All right. Let me kind of carry this out. You know, a little crystal ball gazing here for a second. I think that some of the challenges that we face in general as arborists and urban foresters is helping people understand the connection that trees make to climate variability, looking at population growth and density. And some of our cities are getting so dense that there's not room for trees. And we have to really think about that, is sort of balancing that green infrastructure and the gray infrastructure. And then, of course, human health. I think that it's really interesting now, if you read any of the sort of pundits talking about the pandemic and sort of looking back to the actions that people were taking back in 2020, you know, it's sort of universally accepted now that we should not have been wearing masks outside, and we should not have been restricting people to exercise. I don't know why we thought that the powers that be thought that either one of those was a good idea, addressing it, but the benefits of trees to human health are so well documented now, but we need to be able to tell that story. Ultimately, I think our job, our biggest challenge, is to make trees and forestry, urban forestry, more relevant to more people. And that is really the impact of kind of talks like this. We need to leverage these benefits because they can help us do that. We need to leverage these research studies that I've presented today. So the rest of my stump story, after the lady told me that that the kids made faces to her, I you know, in being a good young budding bureaucrat, tried to kind of gently tell her that probably wasn't going to sway me in getting a stump grinder out there that day. But something in my gut was telling me that wasn't the whole story. And so I said, ma'am, I said, can you tell me more about when the tree out in front of your house, the street tree, died? And she lowered her voice, and she said, yes, it was about 6 weeks ago, around the time my husband passed away. That issue with this lady, the connection this lady had to that tree, was that the death of that tree really reminded her of the death of her lifetime partner. I had no way of knowing that unless I asked the question. You have no way of knowing how people connect to trees, and sometimes it's in very surprising ways. Do you think I moved her up the list of stump grinding? You're right, I did. That's the rest of that story. Reframing trees, I believe, requires us to help people make the connections that they wouldn't ordinarily or wouldn't otherwise make. But we have the knowledge, we have the communication skills, we have the passion for trees that can help them. The amount of research that's out there that demonstrates that trees are not just good, that they're great, that they're important, is so staggering. But yet, our trees are still underappreciated. So I developed this particular presentation at the request of a friend of mine who's a city forester, and he said, "Can you give me can you give a presentation to our community leaders about this?" And I put this presentation together, and then afterwards he told me, he says, "That was really good, but you need to share that." So that's why I put it on my list of talks that I'll give, and that's why I convinced Tom to let me give it here, because I think it's important that that we as arborists and urban foresters, we're not going to shove a research data under somebody's nose and say, see, told ya. But we're going to take that and we're going to read that and we're going to understand it and we're going to put it in our own words and we're going to use it for our own stories or to tell other people's stories that can make a difference in our efforts to be wise stewards of the arborists, of the arboriculture and urban forestry fields. So, thanks for hanging out to the end of the day with me here. I will put the slide up here momentarily. Again, here's my contact information. If you're interested in chatting with me further, please feel free to shoot me an email. And here is the magic number that you would like to know for this particular session. And I have about 3 minutes if there are other questions. Tom, do you want me to see if there's any other questions? Thank you. Okay? All right.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Ries. We appreciate the 2 sessions you gave us today. We really do. And on behalf of Think Trees, we'd like you to have this tree cookie. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, brother.
Okay, before everybody goes, big time announcement. You guys have probably heard again, another acronym, ISA. A lot of you know this, but ISA stands for International Society of Arboriculture. Guess what? Last year, that conference that they have was held in an amazing city called Stockholm, Sweden. And this year, 2023, another amazing city's been chosen, and it's Albuquerque, guys. We're going to get that conference here, which is amazing. And tomorrow morning, we're going to introduce to you the CEO of ISA, and she's going to share with you a lot about that conference. And there's a lot of opportunity for all of you to join in, because I know they're going to need help from all of us, the tree community, and really the tree nerds, the people that really care about what we're all about. So get ready for tomorrow. There's a lot more good speakers. Thank you all for coming. It's been great. See you tomorrow.